Robinson Crusoe. In the city of York, my dad from Germany moved to England and married my English mom, who was a Robinson. So they named me Robinson, too. Dad did well in his job, and I went to a good school. But while he wanted me to have a safe, calm life, I craved adventure. I dreamed of being a sailor and seeing the world. When I told my parents, they were upset. Dad warned me about the tough life of sailors and begged me not to go. Because I cared for him and saw his sadness, I tried to forget my dream. But it lingered. A year later, a friend invited me to sail to London, and on September 1, 1651, I set off from Hull. The journey started rough with a storm that made me very sick and scared. I pleaded to live and promised never to sail again if I survived. When the storm passed, my friend brushed it off as just a little wind, and after some drinks, I decided not to return home, fearing mockery. Though I stayed in London for a bit, the sea still called to me. When a ship's captain asked me to join a trip to Guinea in Africa, I agreed, setting off on my second sea adventure. Initially, all went well, but illness struck again. Near the Canary Islands, a Turkish pirate ship attacked us, and after a fierce fight, they made us prisoners. They planned to sell us as slaves in Morocco, but the captain chose to keep me. Suddenly, I was a slave, and he was my master. This drastic change shocked me. For 2 years, I tried to escape, working in the house and garden, but freedom seemed impossible, always on my mind. My master often went fishing in a small boat, and he usually took me along with a man named Merle and a young boy. Once, my master planned to go fishing with his friends but ended up sending just us 3. Inside, I felt excited, thinking it might be my chance to escape. Out at sea, I carefully pushed Merle into the water and threatened him with a gun from the boat. He swam back to shore quickly. Then, I told the boy, Zuri, to help me or face the same fate. Zuri agreed, excited to travel with me. We sailed south but faced challenges. We ran out of water and had to land where wild animals roamed. I shot one for food, which lasted us for days. Continuing down the African coast, we encountered unfriendly locals who were initially afraid of us. We signaled we were hungry, and they brought us food but kept their distance. The African people watched us as we took the food they gave. I wanted to thank them, but I had nothing to offer. Suddenly, 2 big wild cats, maybe leopards, appeared, scaring the locals. I shot one, and the noise frightened them, but they were glad about the dead cat. They gave us more food and water in return. With plenty of supplies, we sailed on for 11 days, nearing the Cape Verde Islands. Unfortunately, no wind meant we couldn't reach them. Then, Zuri spotted a ship. We tried to catch its attention but failed until I remembered the guns. The smoke caught their eye, and they rescued us. The Portuguese captain listened to my story and agreed to help without wanting anything in return. He even gave me money for my boat and Zuri, who was willing to be a slave for the captain. The captain promised Zuri freedom in 10 years. When we arrived in Brazil, I bid farewell to them, and Zuri started a new life. Later, I grew rich but felt bored in Brazil. Some friends proposed a business journey to Africa. Despite having a comfortable life, I agreed and set off in 1659. Initially, things went well, but a terrible storm hit, lasting 12 days. The ship started taking in water, and the situation seemed dire. One morning, a sailor spotted land, but our ship struck sand beneath the sea, making it immovable. The sea pounded our ship, and we had to quickly launch a boat. Unfortunately, the rough sea capsized our boat, leaving me alone in the water. Miraculously, I washed ashore, surrounded by water mountains, feeling grateful to be alive. Looking out, I saw a wrecked ship but no survivors. Alone in an unfamiliar land, I climbed a tree to avoid wild animals, spending the night there. When daylight came, I saw the sea had calmed. Surprisingly, our ship was intact. I swam back, entered through a hole, and found food in the back of the ship, high above water. Hungry, I ate and decided to bring some supplies to shore. With some resourcefulness, I tied wood pieces together, transporting food, tools, and guns to shore. It was tricky, but I managed to bring everything safely to land. I needed a place to store my things, so I found a cave on a hill and decided to build a home there. Looking around, I realized I was on an island with two smaller ones nearby, surrounded by endless sea. I used materials from the ship to create a tent near the cave, which I used as a kitchen. To protect myself, I built a strong fence using trees and ropes from the ship. It was tough work, but it made me feel safe. Needing more tools, I made 12 trips back to the ship. But one day, a fierce storm took the ship away, leaving me feeling sad and alone. I wondered why I was the only survivor and what my future would be like on this isolated island off the coast of South America. Realizing I'd be there for a long time, I marked the date I arrived and started working on improving my living conditions. I enlarged the cave, crafted a table and chair, and continued working hard every day to create the things I needed. I wanted more storage for my food and tools, but it meant cutting trees, which was slow and tough work. I learned to be resourceful with my tools and took my gun whenever I went out. Sometimes I hunted for food, but when night fell, I couldn't see or do much. Eventually, I discovered how to use animal fat for light. The island was typically hot with frequent storms and rain. During a rainy June, I fell ill, but I recovered and resumed hunting for food. 10 months later, I explored other parts of the island, finding open ground, fruit trees, and wildlife. I gathered fruits to dry in the sun for future use. I also found a lush, green side of the island with diverse birds and animals. Despite this discovery, I chose to stay in my original spot. I continued my routine, exploring occasionally but always returning to my home. My life carried on, and every month, I learned new skills or ways to survive. During my time on the island, I faced challenges and accidents. Once, a storm caused the roof of my cave to collapse, but I rebuilt it using wood pieces. I had plenty of food, learning to cook meat over fire or dry it for later. I also made pots, trying to create a stronger one. Finally, after several attempts, I succeeded in making sturdy pots that could withstand fire. I was thrilled to have hot water and my own bread after discovering corn. However, making bread from corn was a lot of work, and it took me a year to achieve it independently. Despite learning new skills and making progress, I never stopped thinking about escaping the island. I even built a canoe, but it was too heavy to move, causing me great disappointment. That incident occurred in my 4th year on the island. It wasn't until my 6th year that I managed to accomplish. In a smaller canoe I crafted, but it wasn't fit for a long journey. I didn't seek escape anymore. The island had become my home, not my prison. Later, I built a second canoe and house on the island's other side, having 2 homes to manage. My days were filled with chores. I even made odd-looking clothes from animal skins, keeping dry in the rain. Maintaining both houses, I tended to wild goats, eventually having goat's milk daily. Years passed. Then, one day, a footprint appeared on the shore, a man's print. It frightened me. I searched but found no one else. Scared, I fortified my home and avoided leaving my cave for days. Fear lingered for 2 years, but nothing else happened. Slowly, my happiness returned. The sight of a boat far out at sea gave me hope. Perhaps it explained the mysterious footprint. I began exploring the island freely again, even building a secret third house in a cave. Then, something terrible occurred. Walking along the shore, I stumbled upon body parts scattered everywhere. The wild men from neighboring islands came here, killing and eating their prisoners. I seethed with anger and fear. For months, I watched for their presence but saw no signs. Then, one day, in my 23rd year on the island, I spotted smoke and discovered 9 men cooking. Enraged, I vowed to take action the next time they returned, feeling the urge to retaliate against their horrifying acts. I spent 2 lonely and fearful years, always armed with my gun, experiencing many sleepless nights. One stormy night, I thought I heard gunfire at sea. The next morning, I spotted a ship wrecked nearby. Sadly, only 2 men remained aboard, the rest lost to the sea. I salvaged clothes, tools, and a box of Spanish gold and silver. Yet, wealth meant little on the isolated island. I longed for companionship and a means to escape. A plan formed in my mind. Capture one of the wild men's prisoners, hoping for aid in escaping. For a year and a half, no boats appeared. Then, 5 boats arrived with around 30 men and 2 prisoners. As they cooked, one prisoner escaped, pursued by 2 men. Hastening down the hill, I intervened, subduing the pursuers. Frightened, the prisoner approached cautiously, but upon realizing I meant no harm, he spoke. Desperate to communicate, he requested my sword and swiftly dealt with his captor. We concealed the bodies, and I took the prisoner to my secret cave on the opposite side of the island, providing him with food and shelter. Finally, I had someone to talk to after years of isolation. After Friday slept, I observed his physical traits. A young man around 25, tall, well-built, with a friendly countenance, brown skin, black hair, bright eyes, and strong teeth. I decided to name him Man Friday as I encountered him on a Friday. When he awoke, he approached me, expressing gratitude by placing his head near my foot. I began teaching him English, and soon he could say basic words like his name, master, yes, and no. We returned to my initial house, finding no wild men or boats, just disturbing remnants on the shore. Friday, unaware of the horror, wanted to eat the remains, but I showed him the gravity of the situation. I clothed him and made him a tent to sleep in. However, for a while, I kept my gun close, unsure if Friday might pose a threat in the night. Initially, Friday feared my gun, talking to it, hoping it wouldn't harm him. But as time passed, he learned English quickly and assisted with the goats and the cornfields. Our friendship blossomed, and sharing stories made those years the happiest of my island life. We lived harmoniously for 3 years. One day atop the island's highest hill, Friday spotted his country, Trinidad, far in the northwest. This spurred thoughts of escape, wondering if we could sail to his homeland together. However, Friday seemed upset when I suggested building a boat for him to return. He didn't want to go if it meant leaving me behind, even willing to face death rather than be separated. When I showed him the old canoe, contemplating crafting another for our journey, Friday's sadness was palpable. He questioned why I wanted to send him away, pleading not to be parted from me. His loyalty and fear of separation struck a chord, leaving me contemplating our next steps. The urgency of escape swept over me as I saw Friday's loyalty. We immediately set to work on the canoe. Friday was adept with wood, and together, we crafted the boat in a month. 2 weeks later, it was ready for the sea, marking the beginning of our preparations for departure. In my 27th year on the island, our readiness for departure surged. We stored corn, bread, dried fruit, salted meat, and water, equipping ourselves for the journey. However, our plans faced an unexpected turn when Friday returned, terrified, reporting a large ship nearing the island with men coming ashore in a boat. Rushing to the shore, I realized to my amazement that it was an English ship, unusual given their routes. Concerned they might be pirates, I urged Friday to hide in the trees while we observed. 11 men, including 3 prisoners, disembarked. The sailors maltreated the captives, pushing them ashore and drinking, while 2 remained to guard the boat. Quietly, I approached the prisoners, speaking in English to offer help. Their initial shock at my appearance soon gave way to conversation. The captain explained they were victims of a mutiny. The mutineers had taken control of the ship and intended to leave them stranded on the island to perish. With a determination to fight the mutineers, I learned they only had 2 guns left on the boat. Ready for a confrontation, I pledged to stand with the captain and his officers against the mutineers' return. The escape was daring yet successful. The captain, in gratitude, accepted my request. If we regained his ship, he'd take me back to England. We quickly formed a plan. Eliminating the guards at the boat was the easy part. Our real challenge came when we faced the mutineers, 26 men armed and unwilling to return to England, aware of the dire consequences awaiting them. It was a night battle, the darkness offering our advantage. We cunningly maneuvered through the trees, confusing the seamen about our numbers and position. Eventually, the first officer's threatening shouts persuaded them to surrender. We held 3 of the men as captives while the captain and his crew fought to reclaim the ship. Dawn brought the glorious news. The captain had regained control. Overwhelmed with joy, the captain promised to take me anywhere. We left the mutineers on the island without harm, knowing they could start anew with the resources I'd left behind. On December 19, 1686, after 27 years, 2 months, and 19 days, I bid farewell to my island. Friday, my loyal friend, accompanied me. Sailing homeward was a mix of laughter and tears. Upon returning to England, much had changed. My family was no more, but I connected with my deceased brother's sons, seeking help to sell my land in Brazil. Friday, and I traveled to Lisbon, where I met the Portuguese captain who had rescued me long ago. He assisted in my affairs. Upon returning home, I settled into a peaceful life. I took in my nephews, married, and had children. Following my wife's passing, my nephew invited me on an adventure to the East Indies in 1694, where I found more tales awaiting. Perhaps someday, I'll write about those escapades too.